Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Maria Abunto. She is a Medical Science Liaison at Exact Sciences, and we talk about her path from clinician to medical device MSL to therapeutic MSL and beyond. So great conversation. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Instagram and of course, LinkedIn. Hey, Maria, how you doing today? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. It's been, couple years since we met, like 2 years ago?
I think it's more than that. I think it's actually 3 years at the MSL Society meeting in Las Vegas.
Time flies when
Yeah.
you're having fun and when you're in a pandemic, right?
Right. Yeah, things change, but I think we're still connecting somehow.
We are, and I'm glad that you reached out, and I'm glad that we're reconnecting. You had a great idea for a topic. Your background is, I think it's really interesting, and it shows an interesting path that I want to talk about, and it brings us into. I haven't had anybody on this podcast that has talked about medical device MSLs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's going to be an interesting kind of topic to go over a little bit. But before we do that, let's go through like an introduction. If you could just introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what you're up to these days.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. First of all, Tom, I just want to say congratulations on your 1-year anniversary, the MSL Talk podcast. So what a milestone. And this is my first time on your show. So this is exciting for me. My background is in medicine and public health, and I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in 2016, went on to the NIH as an epidemiologist conducting colorectal cancer research. And then 2 years after that, I went to a medical device company focusing on stroke care. And then, just that contract ended just at the time of the pandemic. And it was a blessing, actually, because then I was able to get into a role that I really wanted at Exact Sciences as a medical science liaison.
Yeah. No, I think you're in a great place. Quick shout out to my buddy, Maria Urso, one of the original guests on this podcast. I know is at your company.
Awesome.
So quick shout out to her. So let's go back. So you're in, clinical practice, and then you transition to industry. So how did that go? How did you do that?
Yeah, so I was a former medical director for a busy family medicine practice, and I always knew that I wanted to be more than just a medical director. My journey really began in 2016 when I obtained that master in public health, and that was such a great decision for me, Tom, and it was a wise investment where I worked really hard to increase my knowledge and skill set and discovered that I really loved learning as an adult student. And so in academia is where I found an opportunity to expand my network. And that's what it's all about, right? And I had a mentor in grad school who, after graduation invited me to join his lab at the NIH. And then that's when I got into colorectal cancer research as an epidemiologist. But I knew that research was not for me it was a stepping stone. So I had first learned about that MSL role while I was at the NIH and researched everything about it. And, you and I know about the MSL Society, and we're members and, an active member actually, and enrolled in their training. And that's how I discovered and learned about it. And the more I learned about it, the more it actually appealed to me, building those solid relationships with the MSLs and MSL leaders, Samuel Dyer, the CEO, everyone's just so inspiring and motivating. So eventually, they became my mentors. And I think, some great friendships have formed and developed along the way. So, some of who you and I are friends with, and such a small world.
So you are a clinician, you want to get into industry, you start to do some research and find out how you can break in, you created connections, mentors, you wind up getting into industry. Do you think your clinical practice background was a good foundation? I mean, obviously, I would think you would, but tell me about that. Why do you think clinicians make good field medical professionals?
Right. So that's a great question, because I didn't really know which path to go. And during my job search, I hired a career coach. And so that really helped me. She was also an MD. It's an organization that she handles is called Physicians Helping Physicians. So that really helped me jumpstart my career. And she helped after 10 months of trying to break into the role. I landed my first job as an MSL in industry. But I believe that clinicians are good candidates for field medical positions because of their knowledge, right? Their expertise and years of field medical experience. And because most MSL positions, they require a clinical degree in life sciences, such as an MD, PhD, or PharmD. So you know that these people have extensive experience in clinical medicine and or research and are very smart and very knowledgeable in their therapeutic area, which sets them apart.
And it sounds like your success, a lot of it came from you going outside Absolutely. Of yourself to find mentors, coaches, and go above and beyond. So do you
Yes.
think that was a big part of you being able to break into industry?
Absolutely. And I think it's really, growth really happens when you actually go outside of your comfort zone. And it was something that I knew that I had to proactively do was to build my network. And that because I all I knew was really about medicine and practicing. And then also, the fact that there's a society that, you can actually, join and be a part of. And it's like a family. And I think that that's where I started, was to build my network. And then one thing leads to another. And, you start knowing people, but then there's positions that open and they actually contact you as well.
And you have to start somewhere.
Exactly.
And you have to start somewhere to build your career. And then the next thing you know, 15 or 20 years go by and you have a good story to tell. So let's jump into the middle piece, which is you get a position as a medical device MSL. Tell me what that's all about. A lot of people don't know the difference between a medical device MSL, a therapeutic MSL. So if you can help us with that, that'd be great.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So first of all, I want to explain that one of the myths about the MSL role is being a salesperson, and it is not. In fact, the MSL is independent from commercial, sales, or marketing. And the primary purpose of my role in medical device was really to foster ethical peer relationships with physicians and key opinion leaders, or KOLs. So you're supposed to do that with professionalism and integrity, and then you reflect fair and balance medically. So, and what that means is that in medical device, I was answering a lot of off-label questions. And since there was a lot of off-label use for our products, as the MSL, I was qualified to proactively discuss and respond to scientific questions from physicians with information that is scientific and medical and not promotional. And so it differs also from a lot of, what the traditional MSL is. Since my role was a one-year contract, it was easier to land a job that way as an MSL if you have no experience. But being in medical device differed from a traditional MSL in that the roles are not as common in medical device like they are in pharma or in biotech. And it also differed in how regulations are, especially in Europe. So where the regulatory body is called EU MDR, or European Medical Device Regulations. So which is like the FDA, but they are more strict. And then also the territory I covered, oh my gosh, it was, US and Europe. So since I was the first MSL hired for the company, I covered US and Europe and traveled like pre-COVID 80% of the time.
So I'm sure we're calling on different KOLs and institutions. So who were you actually calling on?
So they were neurovascular surgeons. There were also endovascular surgeons, and there were also, it was in the neurovascular space. So that was mostly what I was focused on stroke care. So we had devices.
Yeah, and it's
for aneurysms.
And your job is to do more in-servicing, education. Are you still providing data? So what exactly do you do with these neurosurgeons?
Okay, so what a typical day would look like as an MSL for a medical device company, it actually involved like 4 key functions, and it's all about adding value. So one is educating. So for example, since I was the first MSL in the company, it was important to educate everyone about the MSL role, as well as educate the KOLs about the product. And then relationship building, which is what I loved most about my job. I fostered relationships within the company and externally with the physicians. So during my meetings, I would have discussions about disease states and clinical research data that we did, and update them as well and respond to the physicians' questions. And sometimes they would want to do an investigator-initiated study, so that's something that we would collaborate on. And then I functioned as a conduit, gathering intel and key insights like during these meetings, and then which I bring those intel back to medical affairs team. And then finally, even within working cross-functionally with other departments in the company, like marketing, I support their messaging on the data and actionable insights. So that allows us to drive value for the products and our portfolio.
So it's really similar. It sounds like
Yes.
very similar, parallel type of job. The focus is a little different, but very, very similar.
Absolutely.
And you did that for a little while. And then did you get to a point where you started to get the itch to want to do something else? Did somebody recruit you to become a therapeutic MSL? How did you transition from that to a therapeutic MSL?
Okay, so my transition from medical device to biotech is such a great story, and one that I feel like has come full circle. So let's go back about 3 years ago in 2018. And when I was at the NIH and I just started researching the MSL role, and I met an MSL from Exact Sciences at one of the conferences. So where I was presenting, and she came up to me, and when I found out she worked for Exact Sciences, I told her, I've been following the company for some time. And then it was then that she told me that an MSL position recently opened up on her team. But when it came time for me to apply, the position had already filled. So bummer, right? So but then fast forward 3 years later to 2020 during COVID-19, which was just around the time my contract ended at that medical device company. And it was perfect timing because the MSL position at Exact Sciences that I was interested opened up again in my territory. And that's when I applied. And this time I finally got in.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you that this really is a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah, it is.
How important it is to develop relationships. Let's just say you're at that conference and you don't go out of your way to, or that person didn't go out of their way to meet you. You didn't maintain that relationship or have that to really put you in the right place at the right time, right?
Exactly.
That's great. I love that story.
And, thank you. And I do too. And I actually said that during my interview. And I think, it was something that was memorable and lasting. I just wanted to say too, that this role is very different than my previous role in medical device. For instance, from the therapeutic area to the KOLs and the job functions. So my current role is with an innovative company that really changes the way we think about detecting and treating cancer. And so because of my previous work in cancer at the NIH in research, I felt that this role is a perfect fit and it really resonates with me. So really, when you want to look for a job, it's really one that really feels that it's just the right fit for you.
Yeah. And you kind of you were following the company, but you also kind of fell into it.
Yeah.
To an extent. Were you following them because of the therapeutic focus? What was the reason you were actually following them to begin with?
Well, because colorectal cancer is really one that I, work extensively on at the NIH, but at the same time, it was something that I've always felt that it is the most preventable cancer, but it is the least prevented. So this is why I focused on that and early age onset. You've heard in the news lately, in the past year, Chadwick Boseman passing away at an early age in his 40s. And this is just a disease that is, if detected early, it's 90% survival. And if it's not, if it's detected at a late stage, it really your survival rate decreases dramatically. So prevention is key.
Yeah. And so it wasn't really coincidental. It was something that you have been following, you've been seeking them out. You prepared yourself, positioned yourself, and you put yourself in the right place at the right time, which I think is so important. Yeah. And for anybody, for someone who's aspiring to be an MSL eventually, or someone who's currently an MSL and wants to take their career into a different direction or a different company or a different therapeutic area, you really have to work at it. And it sounds like that's what you did.
Yes, and it takes time. I think really you have to be patient. It's just been about, a couple years now. When we first met, I was still just an aspiring MSL. So really have to do a lot of your homework, research, but really be passionate about what you really want to do in the therapeutic area.
Yeah. So it's been a few years, and you're doing really well. You've found success. You're doing what you love to do. You were a medical device MSL. Now you're an MSL for a few years. So what advice do you have for MSLs to find success in this day and age? If you had to sit somebody down, or if you had to talk to your younger self, what would you say?
Well, I think that's two-part in that, there are a lot of lessons that I've learned, but then there are also some key success that I've taken along with me. I think one of the important lessons that I've learned early on is that every company operates differently. So learn the rules of engagement early. I mean, there's so much variability in this MSL role depending on the company you work for. So whatever rules and guardrails apply to one company may not always be the same for the next company. So it all depends. And then another great lesson I learned, Tom, from Samuel Dyer, the CEO of the MSL Society, he advised me to choose to work for a boss who is willing to be your coach and coach you and mentor you rather than choosing the company to work for. I've never heard that before, but I always remember this when I was interviewing, and it has worked well for me. So I have an awesome manager now, as you mentioned, her name. And so I'm so happy to be where I'm at. And then finally, the other lesson that I learned is that having a life outside of MSL work where you can pay it forward. And I think that that's so gratifying. It's so important to stay humble and grounded, and volunteering helps me do that, do just that. And so I volunteer a lot of my time as a mentor for not only for the MSL Society, but also as an alumni for the University of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of stuff. I love it. You're doing a lot of stuff. So what advice do you have for MSLs that are trying to find their own level of success as it relates to, so we're in the pandemic right now. And I always
Yeah.
like to talk about that because I get so many questions from people that are asking for best practices or
Yes.
what's working well. So what advice do you have for current MSLs that are out there, they're doing their job and they're trying to hit their numbers, they're trying to find success, and they're having challenges because of this current pandemic? Is there anything creative that you've been doing that you might be able to help other folks with?
Well, I think for one is putting yourself out there, right? Just like this podcast allows me to really have a reach that goes beyond than just my laptop. So really putting yourself out there, and what you've done. I think building your network is key. Having the right mentors. I think building your network, starting on not only LinkedIn, but joining the MSL Society or other societies where you can start meeting leaders, some of these leaders, the speakers. I think that that's very important, not just in your network, but other people's network. Providing introductions. For instance, if people ask me, is there a job out there that you think that would be a good fit? I always send them some posts that I think would, be helpful. Or if one opens up in my company or in my territory, even for a different company, then I would forward those information to them. And it's because I have met them and they're interested in the role. I usually do that and keep in contact with them. I think the advice also that I could give is to just keep in contact with your network and your mentors. You just never know when an opportunity will rise. And I think when you're looking for a job, there is, the pandemic right now, but it doesn't mean that it won't be here forever. So I think it will be, other jobs will be opening up and soon. And so, with Q1 and Q2, we're going into, over a year now in the pandemic, more jobs are opening up. But I think it's really building your network, putting yourself out there, and just really trying to expand your reach.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it's interesting because we don't know what's going to happen next.
Exactly.
We're looking into what we think is going to be a transition to the old days, which is hopefully going to be a return to in-person meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and conferences and congresses and ad boards
Yeah.
and all that other stuff, but we don't know. So how do you prepare for that? Are you still under the impression that there's going to be a lot of virtual engagement, continued virtual engagement? Do you think it's going to be a hybrid moving forward? Or do you think that by this time next year, we're going to be right back to where we were before the pandemic? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I'd have to say with the vaccination programs in place now, and majority of the population will be vaccinated, I think people are more confident in going out and attending these conferences. I believe it will be more of a hybrid. I think that actually you can capture more of your audience that way. So the opportunity to be in person, but also the opportunity to do it virtual. I think that you could get the most, you can optimize it the most that way. But yes, I think in person, there's, it really is, I think, the most impactful if it's in person, especially when you are able to shake a person's hand or even just greet them and say hello. That's I think leaves a lasting impression, but it doesn't mean that we can't have both, being that it can also be virtual and then follow up with an in-person meeting, hopefully in the future.
Well, video is a great tool, and I think it's
Yes.
been adopted. Everybody's using it. It provides this real quick access. And I think that in the future, we're probably going to wind up going in whatever direction we're being led. Where do the KOLs want us? Do they want to meet live? Do they want to meet virtually? Do they want to communicate via email? Do they want to communicate via text? So because of that, does that change your job and how you interact as far as what questions you ask KOLs, how you access them? Obviously, you want to follow their lead. So how do you approach them in regard to the interaction portion of the job?
Yeah, so I really leave it up to them. I do respect their time and their space. So usually it's through emails, and I do a pre-planning prior to going to conferences, for example. And I will try to reach out, or even on LinkedIn, just give a little message on there and let them know that I'm attending and look forward to meeting them. And if I get a reply, then great. And if not, then I'll just follow up. That was a great meeting. And usually it's I have the providers or the KOLs. I take their lead. If they prefer to talk over the phone, then that's great too, or email. But a lot of what's trending now is really telemedicine and telehealth. So that's what the norm is as far as for patients, and that's what it's going to be as far as getting access. Those that are fearful of coming in and seeing the physicians. So we see that trend, and we also follow that as industry.
And what's the directive, just out of curiosity, what's the directive from your organization right now? When are they saying that they want you to get back out there? Obviously, we're almost in April.
Yeah.
So we're getting into that second quarter, and we're looking at the future of life with the vaccines and hopefully herd immunity. Has there been a directive on when they want you to be back out there?
Well, actually, we've already been out in the field, Tom, and it actually was given, that direction was given last year. But it's also dependent, in our team, what we're comfortable with. And so we are tested on a weekly basis, and we have to be, and to make sure that we have negative tests prior to going out into the field, and we follow proper protocol. And we also make sure that when we go and visit a site or visit a physician, that they're comfortable with us coming in. Some places are still not allowing vendors to come in, but our company is, because we are field-based with sales and commercial and also medical science liaisons, we are allowed to be out in the field already.
That's great, because I'm hearing so many different things, and there's
really okay.
Yeah, and there's certain folks that I've spoken to, organizations that they're not close to allowing their MSLs to get back out there yet, and then there's organizations that, like you just said, that have been out there. It's a case per case basis. It really depends on certain things. Some organizations aren't allowing their MSLs to fly; they have to drive everywhere. So we're seeing a lot of different things. We're also seeing a lot of different things as it relates to metrics and KPIs.
Yes.
How has that changed for you guys?
Well, I think the metrics have changed in such a way that, of course, we have to adapt and be flexible. And I think that's a primary function too of an MSL, is to be very adaptable. And so we just change the metrics in a way that still reflects some kind of engagement, whether it be virtual or whether it be in person. And it can also be out, if they're comfortable having dinner discussions. But it really depends, and per company. But in our company, I think what we're comfortable with, I think that we're allowed to be in front of a physician, and these metrics are based on our interactions. And so we enter them based on the topic of discussion, and whether we're talking about the disease state or any questions that they have about our inclusion and exclusion criteria in our studies, or even our products.
Awesome. Great. Well, it's exciting. It's exciting to see that we're starting to get back to the old days a little bit, because I miss it. I really can't wait to start traveling again and being out there and seeing folks. So that's exciting. So last question, if you had one piece of advice to give to a younger MSL or an aspiring MSL, what would it be?
I think the biggest advice I would give is to really be good at seizing opportunities, right? Be willing to take the risk, because great opportunities don't come every day. So it's important to recognize and seize opportunities in new ways that map out your path. I went from being in medicine to going back to grad school, and now working in industry. So you have to choose a career you love, right? Give it the best there is in you, seize opportunities, and be a member of the team.
Awesome. Yeah. Good stuff, Maria. Well, hopefully I'm going to see you soon at a conference or somewhere. Yeah. But this was great. I'm glad that you were able to join me, and I appreciate, all you do, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, just one last plug-in I wanted to say. So I posted on LinkedIn how you can celebrate the International Medical Science Liaison Day, and that's on March 27th on Sunday. So you can show your pride in the profession by sharing the International MSL Day banner. Take a photo of you showing off your MSL pride and include a printable sign. And just like I'm doing now, tell your story of how you became an MSL and why you love the MSL career.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great stuff. I almost forgot about that.
Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's good stuff. Well, we'll definitely do that, and we'll keep in touch. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Tom.
All righty. Talk soon.
Take care and stay safe.
You too. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss episodes in the future, and feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.